Hey everybody, this is Liam from Planned Parenthood of Central and Western New York Education, and
Hey Liam, this is Lynn from Planned Parenthood of Central and Western New York, also in the Education Department.
so today is the first day of our bi-weekly kind of article chat, maybe we want to call it. Me and Lynn each found a cool, funny article, and we're just gonna, chat about them, and you guys can, let us know what you think about these articles in the comments. If you have questions about the articles, feel free to let us know in the comments, and we will, give you guys some answers about what we feel about them.
Or if you want to recommend articles for us to talk about, we could also do that.
That's exactly what I was gonna say next. So yeah, and we'll also link the articles into the YouTube comments too. So so you guys can read them yourselves. Cool. So let's get started. The article I did today is called "Sexual History Taking in the Age of Tiger King." I couldn't find the author of the article, which is really weird. But whoever the author is, they did a really good job. And so, I'm sure you guys have all heard of the Tiger King. It's been a big bit of a thing since COVID started. You started watching it, right, Lynn? But then you stopped?
No, I finished it. It was the number one thing on Netflix, so I think it's fair to say that everybody has seen Tiger King.
Yeah, definitely. But if you haven't, spoiler alerts, we're going to be like dropping some tea about it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of problems with Tiger King. Like when I first started watching it, I was a little like weirded out because at first I thought it was about like someone getting murdered, and I don't really like people like commercializing murder and making money off it. Even like those podcasts like My Favorite Murder and stuff, I know a lot of people love them, but I just feel weird people making money off of other people being murdered. So I went into the show thinking, oh, I don't know if I want to watch this, but I was peer pressured into it.
I found it bizarre. I feel like it promoted in a bizarre way the use of the keeping of tigers too.
Definitely.
So I was just like, oh, I don't want for people to see it and think, yeah, this man is bonkers, but maybe I should get a tiger. And so I was really hesitant to like it, and I didn't.
You didn't get Tiger? You didn't use your stimulus check?
You can afford a small big cap with your stimulus check.
I heard.
I just used it to pay off my credit card.
So something interesting about the Tiger King, before we get into this article, because we actually haven't started talking about what's in the article yet, but so another documentary that was on Netflix a couple years ago called Blackfish was about how terrible it is to keep orcas in cages. And I watched that documentary and it was real messed up. I was super sad at the end of it and I never want to go to SeaWorld again. This Tiger King was originally supposed to be the exact same type of documentary where they were supposed to talk about how terrible they were treating tigers and how they were murdering tigers and stuff like that. But then they got there and they saw how crazy Joe was and they were like, no, we're going to do something totally different.
Huh.
Yeah. So instead of a good documentary about how terrible these humans are, they kind of like idolized Joe and made him into like a good guy. When he's not a good guy. He's actually a really, really terrible person. Like, hands down.
100%.
100%. And so we're going to be talking about polyamory in this because there's a lot of polyamorous relationships in the show. And I'm not against polyamory. If you want to have a polyamorous relationship, like totally live your polyamory life. But the way they're shown in the Tiger King documentary is not a really healthy version. And that's kind of what this article is about. So first off, it mentions like some of the problems with the Tiger King. They misgendered one of the characters. They kept calling him she, which was like really offensive to a lot of trans folk. And then he actually like got his arm ripped off. There was a lot of misogyny in it between like even like among the gay characters like Joe Exotic, and there's a lot of misogyny among him and the way he treated his employees. There's obviously animal cruelty. Like they literally talked about how they murdered tigers. And if you see the follow-up one with Joel, what's his name from The Soup, they talk about more about how they were murdering tigers. Then they're commercializing death and murder and all this other crazy stuff. But the article I read was about how might you talk to one of the three people in Joe Exotic's throuple about their sexual history. So like if they were coming to Planned Parenthood for a clinic appointment, how could we talk to them about their sexual history by using the 5 P's of sexual history communication? If you don't know what the 5 P's of sexual history communication are, which I didn't know them until I read this article, so I Googled it. They are partners, like who you're having sex with, how many people you're having sex with, practice, what kind of sex you're having, things like that, pregnancy plans, prevention, so STI prevention stuff, and then past history, so talking to your partners about your past history, which we know is really important. And so some things come up with talking to the people in their relationships about this, because there's also a lot of drug use in their relationship, and even though the one guy denies that he was using drugs, he had some dental problems that kind of alluded to the fact that he was probably using methamphetamines, and so
everybody else said that everybody was using drugs there.
Yeah, like everybody was saying.
They acknowledged it, but it was like, yeah, we're all using drugs here. So I think it's safe to assume he might have been.
Definitely. And so, yes, he was probably using drugs, which affects a person's ability to consent. And it affects your ability to, like, choose your partners, right? When Joe Exotic met these boys, they were 19 or 18. The one who killed himself was 18 when they met. The other guy, he was 19 when they met. And Joe Exotic was, in his 40s or 50s. So it's certainly an age difference too, which again affects someone's ability to consent. Even though they're all over 18, it affects your ability to consent. And another problem is Joe Exotic was crazy abusive. Again, they didn't mention this in the documentary too much, how he treated his boyfriends. But he was crazy abusive to his staff, and I'm sure he was crazy abusive to his partners. So then how do you talk to this guy about his partners? Are you safe at home? Do you feel safe with your other partners? Do you feel safe with Travis? Do you feel safe with Joe? Do either of them abuse you, either mentally or physically? Do they coerce you using drugs? So how do we have that kind of conversation with one of our patients, right?
There was also, Liam, financial imbalance, right? They said that he paid everybody barely anything. And in Travis's case, he had come from California, and so he was from California in whatever, Utah, Oklahoma?
Yeah, I think it's Oklahoma.
And in a place he's not from, with very little access to money, and how do you get out of that situation if you don't want to be in it? You can't just up and go, you don't have any cash, you're far away from home, and so I think that there's a real financial barrier.
Oh, definitely. And Joe Exotic hired them to be his boyfriend, pretty much. He's hiring these
For a very low amount of money.
What?
For a very low amount of money.
Yeah. Just for the drugs, right, is one of probably the big reasons. Also the tigers. It's a really exotic, cool thing to play with tigers all day. And also, both these guys were identify as heterosexual, right? So even though they were in this gay relationship, they both identify as heterosexual, and so there's probably something else going on a little bit. And then what kind of sexual practices? They didn't talk too much about what kind of sex they were having in the show, but during Travis's funeral, Joe Exotic talked about how Travis liked to put his balls on his mouth and how he loved waking up that way. So there obviously was some sort of sexual thing going on, but was Travis having sex with both of them? Were either of them tops or bottoms? What sort of protection were they using? Were there other people in the relationship, right? Because especially if you're doing methamphetamines, it's already an open relationship. Are there more people that are joining into the relationship? Do you feel safe with these people who are joining? All sorts of stuff like that.
I do think it was interesting, the assumption that gay people engage in anal sex is a common assumption. And the article said, you should not assume that just because it's two people with anuses that anal sex is being had. And I think that generally that is an assumption that's made in society, and that I probably made too. But you're right. It's if you're coming to Planned Parenthood, Joe Exotic and John Finlay are coming to Planned Parenthood, as a couple, we still have to say, do you engage in anal sex?
Definitely. And yeah, like I've definitely made that assumption too, and I also like I'm sure people have made that assumption about me. But when I go get STI tested, right? I'm a gay guy who's married, but they ask me like, do you have vaginal sex? And I think like, well, no, duh. But it's an important question to ask because you don't know what people's histories or what their practices are.
Right.
And so the article actually stops with just talking about partners and practices. They said they're going to come out with a part 2, but they haven't yet. So I'm still waiting for that part 2. But we can still just talk about like pregnancy plans. They were, a gay throuple, but the one guy, Jesse?
John Finley?
John Finley. John Finley ended up having a baby, right? With another girl who he was having a relationship with while he was in this, polyamory marriage.
Yeah. I also just looked it up, Liam, and they were paid $150 a week.
Oh my God.
That's not a lot of money, right? If
No.
that's like your full-time job. And so, like, how do you save up the money to have any sort of, and in theory, Joe Exotic had access to thousands of dollars. And so, what's the balance like there?
Yeah, and did they even, like, he paid them, but did he even really pay them? Like, was he charging them rent, right? Because a lot of people that were on the TV show were living there at the facility. So was he charging them rent? Was he charging them food? Was it one of those situations where, like, you were being paid, but you weren't really being paid because you were also racking up debt during it? If you tried to leave, right, would he be like, oh, you owe me all this money for all that meth I bought you, all that weed I bought you, or those guns? Like, they're not your guns. The one guy, Travis, was really into guns, right?
Love those guns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely, I think it's this article. I think it was just really interesting. It hit a lot of really great points about just how to talk to people, not assuming things, and also brought a lot of like consensual questions into it, like how consensual was this relationship. It's certainly not the normal type of polyamorous relationship, and probably not that healthy of a polyamorous relationship, to be honest.
You know what it doesn't bring up in the article? I think John Finley had a tattoo. Didn't it say, like, property of Joe Exotic on his...
Yeah, like somewhere down on his stomach.
Your penis?
Yeah.
And, like, at the end, he got it covered over. And so, like, I mean, I guess it could have been a joke, right? Like, oh, property of Joe Exotic. But, like, just the statement itself seems a little questionable.
Although,
Like, I wouldn't get a property of Pat's tattoo on my arm, right?
I feel like that's actually much more common. I feel like heterosexual couples, and probably gay couples too, get those kind of like property of, like his kind of shirts, right?
I guess that's true.
And when you get married, the Bible tells you that you're now property, so.
That's true. The article also didn't go into other problematic people, so maybe next week we can talk about Doc Ansel and how he was the worst towards the women he was dating.
Is that, oh yeah. Or Doc?
Doc Ansel, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Doc was like, all the relationships in this show, all super misogynistic, all polyamorous. Like, friggin' the guy who took over for Joe, like who stole Joe's part from him, he like sleeps with his nanny now. Crazy stuff.
Yeah, he insisted that they had to hire a hot nanny.
Yeah. And so,
And you're right, there's nothing wrong with polyamory. It's like a perfectly fine choice. But like the unhealthy dynamics are what, and like whether it's consensual is really the problem.
definitely. And again, like we talk about, consent is more than just, yes, I want to have sex with you, right? So even though these girls and boys and people are like agreeing, yeah, I want to have sex with you, I want to get married to you, blah, 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 is it really consensual with all these other factors? Their drug use, their lack of pay, financial constraints, maybe mental or physical abuse, sexual abuse, things like that.
Right.
Doc like made all his girls like dress up in like really slutty costume or revealing costumes.
That he picked out. Like he picked out what your outfits were. It's not like you have to be showing all your skin. It's like I'm gonna tell you exactly what scene you're gonna be a cheetah girl today or whatever, you're gonna be an alien or whatever sexy outfit.
Definitely. And if you like want to dress up that way, totally fine, right? Like live your life. But if someone's like coercing or manipulating you into doing it, eh, probably not so good.
Yeah. So my article, Liam, was from the New York Times,
Yes.
and it is about cam girls called Sex Work Comes Home. And it was written on April 10th, so if you Google New York Times cam girls, you'll find it. And I found it so interesting because they've been doing a couple stories of how sex workers have been impacted by coronavirus. But this one talks about how since everything is shut down, some really popular cam websites have seen an increase of 60,000 more creators on their website.
Well.
And because people, they were working and not working, or maybe they were engaging in things like stripping, and now their club is closed and they need an option to make money, so they're switching it to online. But people are working like 12 hours a day camming and still not making more money than they were before because people are not spending money, and also because we're not spending money because times are tough, and also because there's so much more content out there that like there's more competition for work. And I thought it was interesting. One of the things that they discussed was that like strip clubs don't qualify for any of the stimulus. So like if you own a strip club and you're closed, you can't get any of the economic relief because there's a part of it that says like inappropriate businesses can't access the funds.
Yep.
And so there's a question like when everything's settled, are strippers who are like legitimate legal employees in America, will they have places to go back to work? Because if you can't get a loan, how are you going to continue to own your building and pay all of your expenses? And so there might be like a big unemployment
Shortage of strippers.
Sex workers and strippers and once this is all over.
And so it's actually not even just the strip clubs that can't get PPP. A lot of strippers can't get unemployment benefits because they're often considered contractors. And so because they're contractors, the strip clubs don't pay their unemployment insurance or whatever. And so like I live right across the street from a strip club, and a lot of those the economy. And a lot of those workers there are independent contractors. And they're positive and negative against it. Like I'm sure they like it probably, but maybe also they don't like it. There's always like both sides to everything. But because of that, they don't qualify for unemployment. So they have to figure out a new way to make money. And camming is one.
And so in New York, if you're a contractor like Uber, you actually can. But it's way more complicated to get unemployment. And so all these people were saying like, I've been getting unemployment for weeks and weeks. The majority of them are people like Uber drivers or artists or I guess strippers who didn't fall into a typical work category like you and I. If we were to get laid off, we've been working these hours at this rate for this long, easy to tie.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in that type of work that's like not as structured, it takes longer. And so if you were a stripper, you've been waiting 8 weeks for unemployment to figure out like how are you paying your bills. And so then you might go to camming, and then you're not making as much money. I also just thought like 12-hour days are exhausting. And I think a lot of people like delegitimize sex work, but like stripping is really hard on your body, and 12-hour days is hard in general. And I think like that seems really, really tough.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like I can't even imagine.
I actually follow on Instagram some people who do like private pages and those kind of like sex cam things. And yeah, like a few of them, one of them specifically, he had a whole story about why he had disappeared for 10 days. And he was like, guys, this is just like really hard work. Like I have to make sure I'm eating like only specific foods so my muscles are always on show. I have to make sure like I'm working out like 3 or 4 hours a day. It's really like it's really difficult to make that kind of content. So I can see, like, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's a lot of freaking work.
There's also some people who, like celebrities, are doing like strip club Instagrams or strip club Facebook, where you're a celebrity, and so you create like a virtual strip club, and then they can cash app you money. And so some people are making like a lot of money that way, but I don't think that there's enough people doing it that makes it work for everybody. Obviously, like, you can only pick a few amount of people at a time. But yeah, what an interesting thing to think about during coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also, like,
No, go.
I was gonna say, it's I found it really interesting that a lot of the sorry, I forgot what I was gonna say. The first time I actually heard about people moving from like traditional or conventional sex work kind of stuff to camming was when we read that article about New York City recommending like COVID sex during COVID recommendations, and one of the recommendations was try to see if you can move your business online so you can social distance from people, which I thought was like really, really awesome that New York City Health Department's that liberal, and be a really interesting idea too. That we all gotta work differently in this kind of time.
I also just think it might be important to think about, like, so if you are watching pornography and you do have cash available, it might be the time to, like, invest your money, or at least a small amount of money, because if you're watching pornography, you clearly find some value in it, and if you have the money to, like, to spend on it, these are like real people, right? They're not just like mythological creatures in our heads. A lot of times we think of porn, people in porn as like people who don't exist in our world, but really, like, we probably all have a friend or a friend of a friend who does porn, or is a sex worker, or is a cam girl.
Yeah.
And so if you have the money and you're using pornography for fun, perhaps now's the time to pay for it.
Definitely, and they're not even that expensive. Like, I don't want this to sound like a commercial for going online and doing this, but like, so the people I follow on Instagram, they're like fans only pages are like $4 or $5 starting, and you don't get all the content, but you get a lot of content for just not very much money.
Yeah. My husband always thinks it's funny because I'll scroll through Instagram, and because I follow a lot of body positive people, I also sometimes follow people who also like sell nudes or whatever. And yeah, you're right. It's like, join my OnlyFans. It's $6, or like become a Patreon. It's $10, and it's like, well, maybe this is the way that you can actually have more quality pornography in your life, not just like whatever you see scrolling Pornhub.com, right?
Yeah.
And you're supporting a small business that the government does not deem worthy for stimulus.
Yeah, which also, can we talk about like how ridiculous it is that the government doesn't think like strip clubs are worthy of like money and bailouts?
Right, but they gladly accept all of the sales tax from their overpriced liquor sales, because you don't drink at a strip club, it is too expensive.
Oh my god, yeah.
Right, or like they take their property taxes, but they don't value them as real businesses in times of need. I also guess that a lot of sex toy companies might be in the same boat, where because they sell sex toys, they might not qualify for any sort of stimulus help.
Yeah, I wonder like how many different industries kind of fit under that. Because Planned Parenthood, we were able to get a PPP stimulus, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, the freaking OTD, the horse track place, got a small business loan, but
so betting's okay, but stripping's not?
I guess so. According to this program,
Puritans.
I think that the OTD did get like $3 million.
Oh my god.
But unfortunately, the colony cannot get it.
No, I mean the county, like,
That's for the county loan.
I think the county probably puts way more money back into our economy than the OTB does. I'm gonna say that.
I
I mean, well,
I kind of wonder, like, how far down the rabbit hole does like a sex, like, if you're a lube company, do you qualify?
Yeah.
Like, where does sex company end and where does the other one begin?
Yep.
Interesting. Okay, well, this was thrilling, don't you think?
Definitely.
So we will be back. Are we doing this weekly or bi-weekly?
I mean, we can probably do it weekly,
Get all the time in the world.
right? I'm working really, really hard, but I can squeeze in another like thing to do.
Yeah, 40 hours is a lot of time when you're at your home.
Yeah, or 35 if you're union.
Okay, so we will be back next week, and we'll have new topics. We might talk about documental. We might talk about something new and thrilling that hasn't even made its way into the news yet related to sex. You all can leave comments on what you'd like us to talk about.
I'm gonna try to not talk too much about COVID. I want to talk about like other things, like just so much COVID talk.
I want to explore weird, fun things that we would not normally talk about. And I guess my Camgirl talk was really about COVID, but it was more about like how we value cancer.
Yeah, like how we value a sex industry kind of thing, and
Yeah.
definitely cool. Well,
Okay.
thanks everybody for tuning in. We will see y'all next week. Bye, Lynn.